Hello and welcome to another video. This is Cracking the Cryptic app Fog of War pack puzzle number 19, Silent Arrows in the Fog. The rules are Fog of War. Correctly placed digits clear the fog around them. Classic. Every row, column and box must have all numbers from 1 to 9 exactly once. Arrow. The numbers along the shaft of each arrow must sum to the number at the base. And lastly, German whispers. Adjacent digits along a green line must differ by at least 5. Without further ado, let's begin by filling in every possible value of every square in the grid. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And number 1 cannot be anywhere here. So, if you take a close look, you'll see that these 3 digits lie on the shaft of an arrow, and this is the base of the arrow. And if you take a close look at the lowest values that these 3 digits can have, that is 2, 3, and 4, which sums up to the 9. And 9 is in fact the highest value that the shaft is allowed to sum up to, because what the shaft sums up to must be the number at the base of an arrow. Therefore, if any number other than 2, 3, or 4 was here, that will cause the arrow here to not work, because this would sum up to something higher than 9, and you could not place a digit there. Therefore, this is not 5, 6, 7, 8, or a 9, and this is therefore a 9. Since we have a 2, 3, 4 triple, you cannot have 2, 3, or 4 anywhere else. And now, this reveals a German whisper line, or lines, because we don't know if they're connected here or not. But what we do know is that all of the selected lines, all of the selected squares, are indeed a part of a German whisper line, even if they are connected or not. And that's why neither of these cells can contain the number 5, because if a 5 was anywhere there, then the adjacent digit on the line would have to differ by 5 from it, which that doesn't work for the number 5. It would be a 0 or a 10. And also, none of these digits can be the number 4. Why? Because, well, the only digit you can place adjacent to the 4 on a line is the number 9. And in this box, number 9 is already taken. So none of them can be a 4. Now, take a close look at this square right here. Let's assume that this square is not a 1, so that it has a high value. Well, if this is a high value, then both on its sides you need digits that differ by 5 from it, so both of them would be a low value digit. But there is only one digit that can fit into there, and that's the number 1. And you cannot place number 1 2 times in the same box. Therefore, the assumption that the 1 is not in this square leads to a contradiction. Therefore, the number 1 must be here. And now, let's see, this must be a high value, right? And it also cannot be a 6, because if it is a 6, then it needs to have a number 1 on both sides, right? Because that's the only number that differs from it by 5. But both of the digits lie in the same box, and so that doesn't work. So this cannot be 6, but it is a high value, right? So that's why this has to be a low value, so it cannot be 6, 7, or an 8. Now this cannot be a low value again, so it must be a high value. And it cannot be a 6, again, because the number 1 is down there. And now this must be a low value, so it cannot be a 6, 7, or an 8. So that gives us some new stuff. This is 7, 8, 7, 8 pair, which means that this must be the 6. And these two cannot be 2, 3, or a 7, 8. So that is a 4, 5 pair. So we cannot have 4 or 5 anywhere there. All right, and now look at this. Can this number be a 3? Well, if this was a 3, then you would have 7 on one side and an 8 on the other side. But the number 7 is not 5 digits away from the 3. So that doesn't work. So therefore, this is the 2, and this is the number 3. Now, since this is a 3, this cannot be a 7, it must be an 8. And then this is the 7. All right, so this is a 5, 8, 9 triple. So therefore, you cannot have 5, 8, or a 9 anywhere there. Now, take a close look at this. This is a shaft, and you cannot have the number 9 on a shaft. That just does not work, because numbers along a shaft must sum up the number at the base. So if a 9 is already here, no matter the other digits, they would sum up to a number higher than 9, which could not fit in the base. So this cannot be a 9. And in fact, if we look at the lowest possible value that these 3 squares along the shaft can have, that is 5, 3, and 1, they sum up to a 9, which is already the maximal value that the base could possibly take. And since the value must be somewhere between the minimal and the maximal value that it can take, and those two coincide, then this is indeed the number 9. Now, and of course this has to be 5, and then this is the 3, and then this is the number 1. So that reveals the number 8 over here. Now, this cannot possibly be number 4 or 6. Why? Because a number 4 would need the number 9 here, and number 6 would need the number 1 here. And you don't have either of them available, so not a 4 and not a 6, so that's a 7. And since this is a high number, this has to be a low number. And the opposite, now this has to be a high number. And it cannot be a 6 either, so that's a 7, 8. And now this has to be a low number, so it cannot be 5, 6, 9. So since this is a 6, we already know which low number this is. It must be 5 digits away from it, so it must be the number 1. And so this is a 4. All right. Now, let's take a bit of a closer look at this thing. So 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. The minimal value that this can take is an 8, but an 8 cannot be there. So the minimal value that this can take is actually a 9, which is also the maximal value that it can have. And so that's a 9. So now we have to clean up the shaft so that it does not contain a 9 or an 8, because that would be too high. Can this thing be a 7 or any of these things? No, because 7 plus 2 and 3 over here, that's too high. That's 12. And same with this. Can this be 7, 3, 3? That's again too high, so we cannot have a 7 anywhere. What about a 6? Can we have a 6 anywhere? If that's a 6, the lowest value here is 3 and 2, which is again too high. What about the 5? Can a 5 go anywhere? 5 plus 2 and 3, that's a 10. And the same on the other side. 5, 2, 3, that's a 10. So you cannot have a 5 anywhere either. And therefore, this is the number 3. All right. So now this has to sum up to 6. And if this is a 3, then it cannot possibly sum up to 6. So it must be a 4, 2. And then this is the 5. And so this is the number 4. All right. Now this cannot possibly be the number 4 because there is no 9 over here. And so that means that this is a high value. And so this must be a low value, and the only low value it can take is a 1. And so this cannot contain a 5 because it's a German whisper, and it cannot be a low value. Therefore, it must be a high value. It's either a 6 or a 7, but if a 6 was here, then the number 9 would have to be on both of its sides, because that's the only number that differs by 5 from it. Therefore, this is a 7. And now, this must be a low number, so it must be a 2. All right. Now, 3, 5, 8, 3, 5, 8, and 5, 8 together, That's a triple, right? Meaning that there is no 3, 5, or an 8 anywhere here. Now, can this be a 6? Obviously not, because 4 and 5 are the lowest possible values here. Therefore, it is a 9. And indeed, since 4 and 5 are the lowest possible values, those are the values. That's a 4-5 pair. So 4, 5, that's how we get the 9. And since a 6 is there, that means the 9 is up here. Now, since a 9 is a high value, that must mean that you cannot have a high value adjacent to it. So this cannot be a 6 or a 7 or an 8. So that's a 3. And now, since it must be 5 digits away from it, that must be the 8. And so this is a 6. And on this side, we can't really know for sure, right? We do know, however, that since this is a low value, then this must be the high value. So this is the 7. All right. Now, what else can we possibly do? 6, 7, that would work. So 4 and 5 must be somewhere up here, right? And therefore, they cannot be anywhere over there. So no 4 and no 5. And now let's just quickly go through the digits before we start dealing with this thing on the right, just to make sure we're not missing anything super obvious that will make this thing trivial to solve. So the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So obviously a 9 cannot be along the shaft, and therefore it must be here. Now, can this be a 6? No, because if a 6 here would make this the 4, which is a 10, and that does not work. So this cannot be a 6. Can it be a 5? Yes. No, actually no, because if this was a 5, lowest value here could be a 4, which would make a 9, but a 9 cannot be up there. And the other way around, you have 5 and 6, which is 11. That obviously also doesn't work. So this is a 1. And therefore, since this cannot be a 4 or a 6, the value here must be a 7 with a 6, 1. And so a 6 must be here, 8 must be here. This is a 4, 5, 7. And now this is a 5. Now let's just keep going. So obviously the number 1 cannot be in the base of an arrow. And so the only other place it can be is over here. So since this is a low value, then the adjacent digits must be a high value because they differ by 5 from it. So it cannot be a 2, 3, or a 4. So that's a 6. And then this cannot be a 4 because it cannot have a 9 next to it. So then this is a 2, making this the 4. So it cannot have a 3 here. Can it have an 8 there? No, because it's just 2 digits summing up. So if this was an 8 and this was a 4, this would have to be a 4 again to make the 8, but that doesn't work. You can't have the same digit in the same box. So this must be the 7, and then this is 8. So this is 3, 8. And now here you have a 5, 6. And of course this is the 3, making this the 4. And then this is a 9. And so this is a 5. Now we have to be a bit careful not to rush, but obviously this is a shaft of an arrow, so it cannot contain a 9. That's a 5, making this the 7. And so this is a 2. So this is 6, 9 free. The puzzle looks pretty solved. That's a 7, and then this is a 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 8, free. Oops, that's a free. And then this is 4, 5, 2, free, 9, 8, and 4. Wow. So that was a very easy puzzle. This does not deserve 5 stars. Usually these Fog of War puzzles, they're strange because they're either very hard or they're like super easy. And sometimes, the fact that your information is limited kind of focuses you on exactly the specific parts of the puzzle that you must use. Whereas sometimes when you're not in Fog of War, you're like looking at everything that's available and you're trying to draw conclusions. But sometimes certain puzzles are just literally easier because they're Fog of War. And maybe this is one of such puzzles, but this definitely does not deserve 5-star difficulty as compared to some previous ones. But thank you guys for watching. That was a fun one, and see you in the next one.